Well, hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the Mutant class and top 10 Mutant champions in the game, in my opinion. Before I do go any further, once again, I do not know what I have to do for people to actually understand these lists and the reasoning behind them. And again, to be clear, these lists are not made on who's more fun to use in 9.2. These lists are not made on who is the best AQ champion, so on and so forth. These lists are made based on the champions you use when losing matches. These lists are made on the meta champions for Battlegrounds and Alliance War, as in the most sought after champions from the most skilled player in the community. The ones that we use when losing matches, the ones where when winning is not guaranteed, and 2 game modes are only like that, where you can't grind through them one way or another. That is Battlegrounds and Alliance War. In Battlegrounds or Alliance War, you either win the war or you lose it. In Battlegrounds, you either win the match or you lose it. Therefore, the players do everything they can to increase their win percentage or chances of winning. That is not the same as quests where you can force just about any champion to work if you're patient enough or if you have enough rebuffs, or any champion that's moderately fitting the fight is the one that you're going to go with. You also have no real need or incentive to rank up for like Act 9. I still use rank 1, rank 2, 7 stars for instance, or sometimes even 6 stars for that piece of content, which is something that you don't really do for Battlegrounds or Alliance War, because those are the champions that you do want to have at the highest possible level in order to give you the edge and advantage. So this list is for the champions that you would most likely want to give your catalysts to. These are the ones that you will sig up, awaken, and rank, because they will have the best chance to actually improve the rewards that you get back from the said game modes. That said, we all see this game differently, we have all different preferences, and these lists are a mixture of my own personal views on the game and current game relevance and trends. Previously, Dazzler was so low because she was brand new to the game and we didn't really know her impact fully yet. And similar to Deadpool X-Force, he was definitely showing promise. And now we can see that previously there was Onslaught, Mr. Sinister, Domino, Dust, Negasonic, Havoc, Sunspot, Bishop, Deadpool X-Force up next, and Dazzler. This time around, the list is wildly different. And before we get any further, I do need to give some honorable mentions. Number 1 is Captain Britain. I do think that Captain Britain actually could have potentially made this list. Not enough people, I think, have her as a 7-star yet, because obviously she's not available anywhere outside of the double track. And in order to get her right now, you would have to help purchase the booster packs as well, which I think is a fairly limited amount of people. But overall, I think she's quite a nasty defender now. She genuinely is. We do have options for her, like, Jack and Bastion and a handful of others. But still, she, is a troublesome defender now, which I think we will see more of in the future. So I do want to give her a shout out as well, for sure. Another champion that previously has almost always featured in these lists, but I think has kind of fallen off, and that is Bishop. Bishop's place in the game is kind of relatively niche and moderate now, where Bishop, is not the type of champion that you would rush to rank up. He was one of the better options for that when 7-star pool was fairly limited. But right now, with the influx of many different defenders and the requirements for it, Bishop just doesn't quite answer most of those as well as many other champions. So he's more of a niche champion for niche uses these days, I would say. So I don't regret ever ranking up Bishop, but his use definitely has dropped quite significantly in my opinion. And then we also have the new buffed Cyclops, which again, I think is a fun rework. He's obviously much better than he was. He has his uses in the game, but I do think he's completely failed and let down by his SIG ability. And effectively as a mutant champion, I don't think he's just quite good enough. In a world where Dazzler and Negasonic and Onslaught and Sinister and Jean Grey exist, there's very little reason for this guy to actually receive full attention, full catalysts. So I have seen some people run him here and there, and obviously when you ramp him up, he can do some very cool things. But that's, I think, again, kind of an excess and not something that's, practically relevant for day-to-day MCOC. So we'll see what happens in the future, but provided that his signature ability doesn't change, I don't think he's gonna age too well. There you go. That said, aside from that, we have also Havoc, who is one of my personal favorite mutants. He has, in my opinion, aged quite beautifully in the game, and he still has some relevance. Again, it is not like a must-have rank up that you will want to use in like every single meta and so on and so forth. But I do think he has maintained quite enough of his power, and he again has like fair amount of niche uses, some niche matchups as well, because Neuroshock being energy damage and typically being very minor, he can take some fights in interesting ways and styles. For instance, he was one of the better Onslaught counters for the last Alliance War season, where we had to take down like multi-million Onslaughts. And yeah, he's quite unique, and I do enjoy having access to him. But it is undeniable that, you know, these days I do think we have more powerful champions in the game as well than Havoc. So, the last honorable mention, I think, is going to go to the Weapon X. Again, fairly unique, obviously rare, quote-unquote, trophy champion, but I do think a fairly large amount of people do have him by now. And you do see him pop up here or there, and obviously he does have some defensive threats. He can also be like a good answer to Bullseye, for instance, with a fairly hectic playstyle. There are some people who are absolutely sold on him, but I do not think he's kind of like a staple of the Mutant class, for the most part. So, let's move on to spot number 10. Now we're actually starting the thing, and in spot number 10, and I'm going to try and make this a bit shorter because these have been quite lengthy. Anyways, it's Sunspot. Sunspot, again, has had a fairly mixed up and down relationship with MCOC community, but overall I do think he earns the 10th spot still, because he still is a relatively good answer to some of the more modern threats. For instance, you know, Dust is quite popular. He's a good Dust counter. For instance, he can take down Yelena as well, reasonably well. He's not as good as, you know, let's say Onslaught or Jean Grey or a handful of other champions, but, you know, he's capable of doing that fight. Has always been a very solid Nick Fury counter, which has become more relevant because now we do have 7-star Nick Furies running around. So you do see Sunspot here and there. Again, you can't say that he's like a mainstay staple, but people who have invested in him definitely are getting their catalyst's worth back. He is quite fast nuke attacker. He doesn't have like the largest amount of utility, but that access to incinerate, fairly amount of large damage and perfect block does provide him with a very solid kind of like base for being effective. And the matchups that he can do, he, you know, does quite all right. So I do think that Sunspot is a very solid start on this list, and there we go. Moving on, spot number 9, I'm gonna give it to Negasonic. I do think Negasonic has dropped in value undeniably since the release of Dazzler and Jean Grey and, you know, a few other champions. Because Negasonic, like, on a personal level, I never liked Negasonic. I think Negasonic is the perfect description of a soulless champion. Whenever I play Negasonic, I don't feel like I'm actually, you know, playing Negasonic. I feel like I'm using a collaboration of abilities that is designed to, you know, counter everything and anything that skill class has to throw at you. But it comes with, you know, immediate built-in downsides of her being very squishy and her having like a fairly mid damage output. So does she answer just about everything and everyone in skill class? Yes, she absolutely does. Even against the Yelena, she can like take down a Yelena. She's just not going to be fast about it. But the entire point being is, she's the champion that you use because you have to use, not much because you want to use. And now that we do have, like, you know, equal or better alternatives, that, for instance, Dazzler takes much of the same matchups, better, faster, and being less squishy, and has, like, more stuff built into her. The only kind of, like, upside Negasonic would be against Bullseye, I suppose. Definitely does give her usability, but again, she's one of those champions that you kind of drop and put aside as soon as you have the opportunity to do so, in my opinion, as well. And that's just the way she is. You know, when she was announced with her ability kit, we were like all super hyped, and then everything else afterwards kind of spoke and does speak against her. Like, you know, her abilities completely counter skills, but it's a fairly mid damage, and she's fairly squishy, and you know, it's, you know, she's not like the most interesting or fun champion to use to begin with, and there's the timer watching and whatnot. So that is where we are with Negasonic, in my opinion. I think she's usable. I think she's effective. I think it's worth having her. But if I do have a choice, I'd rather use, you know, other champions. Because I don't think she's a well-designed champion. She just has a bunch of anti-skill abilities thrown in her kit. And that's kind of complemented with, incinerate damage. And there we go. So that's what I generally think of Negasonic. I can't wait for some more mutants to come out so she slips even further down and she becomes a relic of the past. Because again, I do not think she represents like the best MCU has to offer in the champion design department. But her usefulness cannot be understated either, hence she still does make the top 10. You could make an argument that she could be moving up a spot or two as well. But let's move forward. Spot number 8, I'm going to give it to Gentle, and I kind of actually want to put Gentle a bit higher. Initially, when Gentle came out, a lot of people were very critical of him, myself included, and I didn't particularly like the champion. But I do genuinely believe that he packs in quite solid universal package in his kit. Is he like a great attacker? No. He's all right. Like, he can do some of the fights, and he's not going to be awful. And, whatever the fights he does reasonably fast. He's not the biggest nuke, but he's not particularly slow either. Is he like amazingly, insanely tough defender? Also, no. He's not like a Serpent type of champion. He is fairly rough on defense. You do want, specific type of champions to counter him, so he's good enough on defense, but he's not like awful. And I think that kind of describes him. He's just like a good champion, good mutant. And then after I ranked him, I kind of started liking him even more. Because again, he was fairly competent on defense. And then there were like the Bullseyes and a handful of other matches where you do end up using him. And like, it's kind of decent. And then there are like these few of the metas where, when you get to trigger your bleed immunity, for instance, or when you're working against tenacity or whatnot, you get your pursuit, so you can easily bypass their wades. And yeah, quite like it. And the fact that, he can do Yelena reasonably well. Again, that is quite cool also. But it's not the most versatile offensive kit, I'd say. Overall, again, I do think he's kind of on the way up, and he's the type of champion that I ranked. I kind of ranked him up as a spur of the moment thing for Wheel of Fate fight. When I pulled Gentle, I thought I'm going to rank him up eventually because I kind of like him. Then I had like an immediate need and reason to rank him up for Wheel of Fate. And I was like, okay, I might as well rank him up now. And he's been good and useful since. So I do like him as a champion. I do not necessarily value him above anybody that's higher on this list for now. That might change. But I absolutely do not regret having ranked up this guy. So I do think he deserves to be here. Next up is Deadpool X-Force. Deadpool X-Force is fairly straightforward, fairly one-dimensional, but it's, again, one of those things where every champion has its time and place to shine. And right now, I do believe that Deadpool X-Force is kind of getting his chance. Because not only he can do a lot of completely random fights, because, nothing is immune to his Splood debuffs, or whatever they call it, bleed debuffs, because, they're passives and no such immunity to them exists. So by extension, he's actually capable of finishing off a wide variety of fights, if not the best, then to a reasonable level, and he is quite fast. What does give him more value these days specifically, again, is the Daunted, and the fact that he can nuke down Yelenas incredibly well. He's like the best Yelena counter. And like, for instance, right now I do have a rank 3 Deadpool X-Force in my deck, specifically for Yelena for the upcoming metas. There's no other reason he would be, like, he would not make it otherwise, but because Yelenas exist, and him being the best counter for that fight, he's in that deck. And then besides that, obviously Nick Fury coming out as a 7-star, him being a Nick Fury counter if you do have him at high enough sig, also quite significant. And that's effectively where we land. He, can do fair amount of fights. Again, not all of them he's going to be the best, but he does, do the Nick Fury and Yelena fight very, very well, which is super relevant these days. And yeah, I think they did quite a good job on the rework of the guy. And that's just about as simple as this. He's serviceable against Bullseye. He's decent enough against, plethora of the skill champions, if not, not the greatest, but he's certainly capable of doing those. But he also does go wonder outside of the skill class quite well. So I am putting Deadpool X-Force currently at spot number 7 for, the metagame in MCOC right now. Moving on to spot number 6, now it's Domino, and Domino is still relevant, just about as relevant as ever. I do think, again, she has taken a bit of a step back, and that is absolutely no fault of her own. Domino is like an embodiment of a champion that proves that regardless of how many counters you make against Domino, it doesn't really matter because you can't always have a counter to her. And if you don't have a counter to her, you're probably going to have a very, 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 very bad time. And that's why I think she still poses a ton of value. Now, we all know that Dominant is a competent attacker in her own right, because that is where initially much of her appeal and value came out, especially when you synergize her up. But even on her own, without the synergies, she, is very inconsistently, but potentially awesome. Because, you can drop a level 2 and it can, completely erase opponent's health bar and put on a big crit bleed, or it can do nothing. So, she's definitely not the most reliable attacker, but when your back's against the wall, she can often surprise you and do some random fights incredibly well, including against like Atumas and Bullseyes and whatnot. All that said, obviously, without kidding ourselves, the reason why Domino is valuable or as, ranked and used as she is the defense. And the thing is, if you look at the tech class, you're going to see a ton of defenders in the tech class for her. Sorry, a ton of options, that will destroy Domino. Like, Arcade's quite decent against her, and then, we have Guardian that's great against her, and then we have Red Skull, and then we have Prowler, and then we have Nimrod, and then, yada, yada, yada. Kabam has made a lot of champions that are, very good against Domino. But there's only that many champions people, bring in their decks or have ranked or have available for any given specific situation. And she's still kicking ass. Whoever made Domino either was A, diabolically evil, or B, incredibly incompetent. Those are the two things. Because she has come out in what year was it? 2000. I don't even remember, but it's a long time ago. A long time ago when she came out. And she's still such a monster to fight against. Especially in some of the metas that give her unblockable, and if she happens to be unblockable whilst you're unlucky and you're not being able to dex that special, that's like auto KO there. And yeah, she's still a menace. The reason why she's a bit less of a menace is because she's the type champion that you can still kind of kill without a perfect counter. You'll take the crit fail damage, and that's going to be very painful. But now we have a plethora of champions where if something goes wrong or if you do not have a suitable counter, you're just gonna die, and there's nothing I can do. Like, there's like the Bullseye, the Enchantress, in Serpent, and so on and so forth. So, Kabam has kind of taken the idea of what Domino is and what Domino does, and incorporated that to a ton of new champions, where she's an easy fight with a proper counter, and she's an absolute nightmare, unavoidable damage type fight without. Kabam does that a lot now, but I think, obviously with newer versions of that, they're also often more potent and with less counters available in the game. That said, I do still think she's a staple of MCOC. Every kind of like big account should have her ranked, and we're probably utilizing her as well. Right now, however, there might be some champions that could potentially take priority over her. And one of those champions, especially recently, has been Dust, man. Dust has been kicking it up in every which way. She is a pain in the neck defender, and people, kind of similar to Domino, underestimate Dust offensively as well, because Dust is, decent enough. For instance, I have seen Dust take down Yelena's and Dust take down Atumas relatively well, and she's relatively good against Nick Fury, so she's not bad offensively either, realistically speaking. Especially outside the battlegrounds where you're not racing, but even in the battlegrounds, she still can perform quite well offensively. But then there's obviously the defensive annoyance, where meta after meta after meta, you just never want to be facing Dust, because, the phone lagging issues aside, she is a finicky champion to go up against, a champion that you do need to keep a track on how many debuffs she plays on you. She disables willpower, so chip damage is almost guaranteed. And then you can't really punish her level 1s unless you're in your own corner, because the recovery time is quite fast. And level 2 is incredibly difficult to dex, so that typically means some more chip damage. And then if you do make a mistake and she spins up a storm, there's obviously effectively an unavoidable damage coming your way. And then she does have the crit resistance and, glancing and whatnot. So she's not quite the new age defender where you're just screwed and dead immediately, but there's plenty going on for her offensively and defensively for her to be one of the more relevant mutant champions in the game right now, in my opinion. Move on, spot number 4, and that is Jean Grey. Now, Jean Grey has all the opportunity and the chance in the world to actually potentially move up a spot or two. She is currently one of the more present mutant champions overall as well. Part of that could easily be the shiny new toy kind of like mentality that this community has. And it is impossible to deny it, you know. MCOC community is very susceptible to every new champion must be amazing, and that's why I'm going to chase it, rank it, because, you know, there's a whole bunch of hype videos coming out and look what they can do, and then, you know, majority of them several months down the line are irrelevant. I don't think Jean Grey, however, is in much danger of that happening, because again, she does pose dual threat value. She does have plenty going on for her offensively. She is, you know, quite a fast offensive champion that can take just about everybody in the skill class, including Yelena, with her daunted on the level 2 and the way she distributes the damage, so she's quite good for that. And then obviously on defense, she's again quite annoying, quite capable defender, because not only you do need to be able to deal with reverse controls, either via immunity or being able to play around that, but also because she is quite chunky, because you don't really want to crit against her, you're going to get the exhaustions on you. And then to further that, you also need to deal with her shield, and that can ruin rotations and absorb a ton of damage. And yeah, that's where we are with Jean Grey. So I do think she is 4th in the mutant class currently. I do see it, you know, alternating, because again, the less time a champion has spent in the game, the harder it is to precisely and confidently rank and place them. And on a personal note, I often end up being a bit more cautious with the newer champions, and I want to give them, you know, a bit of time to kind of like exist in MCOC to see, you know, whether they work in the most metas or don't, or, you know, are they answers to many or newer difficult different defenders. And still, based on what I have seen so far, Jean Grey is definitely up there, popular, hot, useful, used, and capable. So I'm giving her spot number 4. Spot number 3 for now is going to go to Dazzler. And this one I'm kind of starting to doubt a little bit, just because we are going through a solid 2-month period where Dazzler is borderline useless. But we're going to see where that ends up being. It is undeniable, though, that up until last 2 months, Dazzler was lighting contest on fire, and I absolutely love that. She's doing a very, very good job going out of her class as well. Not only she effectively poses or gets, you know, majority of the utility that Negasonic has, especially against skill class matchups, where she can effectively reflect back the damage, which is, you know, even better. Her only like one weakness matchup would be the bullseye, which is much harder to do unless your Dazzler is Sig 200, because that pursuit passive duration, you know, is just too short in my opinion, and ideally should not have been tied to the Sig. I think they should have just let Sig ability to be this, and then, you know, pursuit being in her base kit at max duration. At the same time, her Dex ability, or her enhanced Dex, again, is critically useful against random matchups like Photon or whenever else, you know, dexing would be an issue or that are unavoidable. And then in general, she's also quite fast, quite capable. There's a fairly large amount of damage associated with her level 2. And that's about all she needs. She's, in my opinion, a superior version of Negasonic that does more than just about all the matchups except for Bullseye. The fact that she can nuke down, you know, random maestros and what have you, and, you know, still capable of taking a Photon, albeit not the fastest, definitely gives her a ton of value, because, again, she's capable in going across the class board and doing quite well. I love that. I think that's quite cool, and I think she deserves spot number 3, because out of all of the newer mutant additions and buffs, she has kind of showed herself to be the most capable and competent most often. Last month and a half notwithstanding, basically. But here we are. And the top 2 is quite simple. Top 2, I don't think I really need to jump in that much of a detail. I think Mr. Sinister is still the second best mutant champion in the game. Now, I do think he maybe has taken a bit of a step back, But overall, still a very, very gnarly, nasty defender. Incredibly capable champion offensively too, albeit not the fastest, but him ensuring that he just about always finishes the fight with full health is so helpful. So many times I have lost matches and I have seen people lose matches, going up against Sinister by picking a matchup where they know they can outspeed Sinister, but end up taking 4-5% chip damage in the fight, and Mr. Sinister just finished with squeaky clean 100% and still gets the W's. And overall, Mr. Sinister again is absolutely insane offensive champion just about everywhere in the game, including Alliance War, including any other game modes or story modes or challenge modes, because he does pack in a ton of utility, ton of versatility, and sustainability. So I love the rework. I think it's one of the better reworks. I do think his SIG ability is underrated, and there's a massive difference in between no SIG Sinister, low SIG Sinister, and the high SIG Sinister. Because pending, obviously it's a bit RNG, depending which class benefits you do receive. But for instance, if you're going up against a defensive Sinister and there's a lot of Mystic charges active, then it's the fight's immediately significantly harder. Or when you're going up against him and he has Cosmic Fury, that immediately increases any and all degen damage that you would take, and that becomes significantly more punishing. And vice versa offensively too. If you do have these Mystic abilities active, a couple of them, and he's high SIG, it's super easy to get your level 1s back to back, and have more degens flying around. Or when you get Cosmic ones, you do that much more damage and you can actually finish fights very fast. The rest of them are not quite as useful because special attack damage does not increase his degen damage, so that's kind of a bit of a letdown. Precision increase in critical rating, again, you don't hit opponent that much for it to matter. And Science 1 has been broken forever since the release. Once again. But overall, I do think he's still incredibly capable. I do think he's valuable. I do think, just about every account should have access to him because he can do a ton of things. And the best mutant in the game is unequivocally Onslaught. And I do think Onslaught is just a filthy, filthy champion. And I do have a problem with Onslaught. That is, despite me understanding how good of a champion he is and how capable he is, I just hate him. I don't like him. I don't like fighting him. I don't enjoy that because his special 1 takes forever and it's 57 dexes built into that. And then using him, he's not a champion I would ever use willingly offensively. Whenever I do use him for anything, that's because I have to. In Alliance War, if he's the best option, obviously I'll use him, but I'm not going to enjoy it. And then, I used him for Necropolis, and I really didn't enjoy it because it's constantly timer watching, dropping in your heavy attacks, making sure nothing falls up, and it's just exhausting and not fun to me. And the same thing in Polygons. Obviously I use him for Polygons because he's very, very, very good. But outside of competitive situations or Everest content, I never use him for fun. He's the last champion I'd want to bring in a queue, for instance. He's the last champion I'd go, casually questing somewhere. And I don't like that. Again, I fully understand he's great. He's a must-have champion in the game. Second highest prestige in the game now, after the High Evolutionary. So he's, a prestige bait. He's, in my opinion, top 4 champion in the game. Answers a ton of threats. He destroys the entire skill class. I don't think there's a skill champion he doesn't do well against. And then outside of skill class, in a pinch you can use him against Serpent and he's going to do reasonably well. In a pinch you can use him against Thanos or Maestro and he's going to do quite well. You can use him against a whole plethora of different difficult defenders because he's incredibly versatile. That's why he's the best. He is the best. This is how people must have felt about Michael Jordan, I bet. Because Michael Jordan was famously a dick as well. And despite that, we all admire, look up to the guy, we value him. Michael Jordan's my NBA GOAT. And that's kind of situation in the Mutant class with Onslaught. Is obviously the best. It's not for discussion. I just hate the fact that he's the best. Like, he is the pinnacle of Mutant class currently. Capable attacker, capable defender, high prestige, tons of matchups that he can do, works in almost all the metas, very, very good in every single which way you look at him. He's the best unduped champion in the game as well, in my opinion. And I just can't stand the guy. Like, I hate using him. I don't enjoy it at all, and I don't like fighting him much either. And, through you, he's very, very good, though. He's not fun or enjoyable to use. But there you go, it's still the best. So I obviously do have him at rank 4. I just don't love him. But anyways, that's what I think about the Mutant class currently in the game. And here we're going to put it in the list for you. Onslaught, Sinister, Dazzler, Grey Dust, Domino, Deadpool, Gentle, Negasonic, and Sunspot. Honorable mentions went out to Captain Britain, Bishop, Cyclops, Havoc, and Weapon X. Let me know what you guys think. And I will catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about